Move to our third speaker, Dr. Malkanthi Hettiarachchi, wealth of experience in the topic rehabilitation and combating terrorism, and she's a clinical psychologist, and she will bring us her personal experience and what happened in Sri Lanka, how did the recruitment took place, and the psychological impact of the trauma that the Tamil children had to undergo, and then how they were used, misused, and exploited in war by the LTTE. Mal, over to you.
Thank you, Professor Columbage, for that introduction. I'd like to start off by saying that my first contact with children, the 594 children, was in Ambepussa in 2009, June of 2009. And the majority of the children that I managed to speak with, the statements that they made was, we want to study. Please help us to study. And the entire Ambepussa Center was geared towards educational and vocational training. It was a training center to build resilience, to help children to process whatever trauma that they had gone through. And for me as a civilian coming from outside into that center, what I saw was the cadet corps that was in charge of the children were helping the children to process their memories, to adjust and to come to terms with the fact that they had been with a terrorist organization and that they had come out and they had a future. A lot of effort was put in to tell the children, you did what you did at the time because you didn't know whether it was right or wrong. So children were helped to morally and emotionally adjust to their predicament. What I saw was a gold chain around the neck of these children. There was no more a cyanide capsule. These little girls and the boys were used to carrying a cyanide capsule. And in their nails, one of the other doctors who went with me at the time said, did you see, they don't have gunpowder in their nails anymore. Instead, they had nail color. So it was a huge transformation for these children. The human rights aspect, the laws to protect the child say children has to have the right to life. And here for the first time, these children were given a future and the right to live as children. They had the right to education because as General Sudhanta said, the program had an educational component. They had the right to learn vocations, a vocational training. They had the freedom to practice their religion, to engage in social and cultural events. They had the freedom for their parents to come and meet them whenever they wanted. I was there when some of the parents came and put little gold chains around the necks of those children. Could they do that during the time of the LTT? Could they put a chain around the neck of a child? No, they couldn't. So if we speak about child rights, we need to know very clearly that the children's right to freedom, their right to think, their right to be, to their right to dress, and for their education, health, all that was manipulated when they were part of the LTT. But did they know it was being manipulated? I don't think they knew it was being manipulated because that is how it was presented. The narrative was presented in that way. When the children came into rehab, they had dignity. They engaged in the educational program when children were assessed as wanting education and they were assessed for the vocational training program. They were given a choice and they were assessed and they were placed in those centers. I remember that when it was time, when the 12-month mandated period of rehab was over, I remember that the parents came and spoke to the Commissioner General and said, can my child remain within this program? But it was not possible because the Gazette notification was for 12 months. But did the Bureau for the Commissioner General for Rehab said this is the rule, we can't do anything about it. No, they didn't. They spoke to school principals, they spoke to other agencies, and they made sure those children's education will continue. So if we look at why we had the six-pronged model, why did we have education? Because education was denied by the LTT, by the terrorist group. The education they got was to learn to kill and to hate. Their vocational training was manipulated. The only vocation that they knew was to carry a weapon or to attack somebody, even to attack their own, because in the process of indoctrination, the LTT made children attack their own to desensitize them. So psychological rehab was there because psychologically these children were manipulated. We had cultural, social, and family rehab. Children were again able to engage in all the cultural programs that this country has. This country is multi-ethnic and multi-religious. All that was brought back. LTT promoted a mono-ethnic, mono-religious, monocultural pathway. But Sri Lanka's nature is not that. It is multicultural, multi-religious, and multi-ethnic. So we have to live in harmony. That component was provided. Again, the spiritual aspect, the spiritual rehab involved that the children could practice their faith within these centers. So if a lot of cultural and psychosocial and creative therapies were used, because if you take the Tamil culture, it has music, it has dance, it has puppetry, it has villupattu, it has comedy. All this was brought back. Were these provided for the children during the time of the LTT? No agency talks about this. When they talk about violations in Sri Lanka, what are the violations that they are talking about, and what are the violations that they are blind to, that they are consciously avoiding? Now, when I come back to that, today when you look at what is happening overseas, and with all these agencies and in different countries, today so many countries, their soil is being used to radicalize young people. It is no more a terrorist group with grenades and machine guns and arms that are radicalizing these young children. Who is radicalizing? Are the child protection laws within these countries suitable to protect the child from their own families that take these children for these protests? We have seen images in the last couple of days, as Professor Columbage said, of a child cutting a cake. Does that 3-year-old child know that that child is cutting a cake related to a terrorist leader responsible for the genocide of so many children, genocide of their own ethnic community? That child doesn't know. Who is there to safeguard that child? The parents. Are the parents safeguarding the child? No, the parents are also being radicalized. So they are using the children. If I look in the last couple of days, within most of the European countries, children are making statements, shouting slogans. Do they know what they are talking about? They are disseminating posters, leaflets, and banners. They are being used by adults to do this. They are wearing insignia. Now, would these countries tolerate if these children wore IS insignia and walked around, carried IS banners and flags and posters? They would not. So why would there be a double standard? Adults use children to distract, because if they go and paste posters, they are likely to get arrested. So what do? They use the next best thing that is living in their home. They use their own child to do this. What are the laws that are there to safeguard this child when the parents are using these children? Why do terrorist groups and radicalized communities use children? They use children to gain sympathy, because it is stunning, it is shocking, it is awe-inspiring to have a little child put before a camera to make statements about um, uh, wanting a separate state or wanting religious freedom. And this is done by IS, this is done by Al Qaeda, this is done by the LTT, those who are promoting separatism. Also, children are used psychologically to break the psychosocial barriers, because when a child speaks, people listen because it is a child that is speaking. And there is a gradual attempt to normalize the use of violence so that individuals in the community can morally disengage from the need to use violence. Also to gather attention. So children are used by individuals in the community, not only by terrorist groups. And I believe that the child protection laws within the UN, within any nation, needs to extend its full application of the law, whether it is a terrorist group, whether it is a school that is helping this to happen, or in the home front. Because even a parent has no right to abuse a child. So what are children mainly used for? They are used as messengers, as spies, to carry material, as suicide bombers, as fighters, recruiters, to gather food, and for sexual gratification, and to do domestic activity. Now, currently, when we see all these children being used and being radicalized, do these parents know that when they are promoting this outside Sri Lanka, and if a conflict again starts here, that this is the predicament of the children? These children are used for spying, for sexual gratification, and to work like domestics within these organizations. So the impact for the child is horrendous, because the children go through multiple losses. They go through displacement. They go through series of negative life events. As children, they see what only adults should see. They see death, they see destruction. They lack education. Now a child has the right to education. They lack facilities. These children have the right to have a good standard of living. Gradual adjustment of community values is something that we see happening, because children are desensitized to violence, the community is desensitized to violence, and we see this happening before our eyes in the 21st century. On one side, there is fighting against the IS, use of children, use of women, and on the other side, it is not possible for any of these countries or agencies to allow the use of children by family members and by the community. Because finally, the terrorist group becomes a pseudo family for this individual. Youth radicalization basically lays the foundation for future conflict. So if any country overseas is allowing their soil to be used by individuals promoting a terrorist organization by referring to as a freedom fighters, that has to stop. Because if they look at this particular book written by Thomas Koruth Samuel, he speaks about the youth radicalization, and this is not referring to Sri Lanka, it is happening globally. If we look at the radicalization of children, this book refers to the LTT children being radicalized in Europe. And we have the exit book, Way Out. This refers to youth being radicalized on the neo-Nazi, the extreme right wing. Whether it is separatism, right wing, left wing, religious, it's happening to children. And I believe that all the agencies that are available, that are supposed to be speaking on behalf of children and youth, need to take a very good hard look at what is happening. Because what is happening now with promoting the LTT, supporting the LTT, It is not happening with guns and weapons. It is happening with men and women in suits and dresses, campaigning in corridors of power, campaigning countries, campaigning their presidents and huge agencies. I believe that these people at the height of their power in these countries do not actually know what is happening in Sri Lanka. I think they need to come. They are advised by people around them who are influenced by votes and funds for their campaigns. So I believe that if anybody is genuinely interested in children, any of these agencies with massive lists of child protection laws, I would challenge them to take a good hard look at what is happening currently in the rest of the world and not to allow promoting any agency or group, not to allow their soil to be used at all by any organization or country to promote radicalization of young people, because when you radicalize youth, it ends up in conflict. Thank you.
Mal, thank you very much for giving that excellent narrative about child soldiering and how they were recruited and how they were used and the repercussions. And you mentioned that the children were innocent and they didn't know, and then they were exploited, manipulated. And I think you spoke your personal experience about the rehabilitation program. And some of the children, even after completing the period of rehabilitation, came back to the same institution to continue their education. And they were given hostel facilities, everything free to continue their education. So this is how Sri Lankan government handle the child soldiers of the LTTE. Now, you also, I think you brought, instead of a cyanide capsule, the children were now having a gold chain. Instead of gunpowder, they were having nail polish. So this is the reality that you have personally experienced. But you see, I think the final point that you brought out, that is the child protection laws, even the parents don't have a right to abuse children. And what we saw during the last month or so in the Western capitals is the children were heavily abused to propagate terrorism, propagate child soldiering, to promote suicide terrorism, glorify terrorism, I would say. And that is wrong. Glorifying terrorism by the use of children is wrong. And of course, I think we can expect a video to come today, probably. It is actually a video which we have not seen so far. And it really shows the real, not completely undoctored video about the LTT child soldiers, which none of us have seen before. It is supposed to come out today. And so that will really shed light on the LTTE atrocities. Now, I think you brought out a point that it was the LTTE who was responsible for genocide of their own community. Whether it is the children, whether it is the political leaders, whether it is the intellectual, whether it is the Hindu priest, it was the LTTE who has killed them mostly, right? They didn't die in the battle. They were killed by the LTTE. So there is no two words about it. So thank you, Mal, for bringing that narrative, because with your personal experience and your professional qualification, you really did justice to your topic and really appreciate it. Because we are running out of time, because now we have come to 11:20 and we have to stop by 11:30. But there are many questions, but I think we will not have time to answer all these questions. But I would request the panel, if you want to add anything as your final thoughts. I would not repeat the questions because I don't have time. Dayani, if you want to have a final word.
Yeah, what I would like to say is that even, I mean, as we all discussed that where this kind of propagation is happening in the Western world, all these countries have ratified all these conventions and laws. So they need to look into those things and ask the question, as I asked before, are they doing the right thing to the children? As Mal said, these children, we are exposing them to violence, which we shouldn't be doing that. And this is where that I have a point that laws are there. Even the laws does not make sense if the leader in that country is not really taking that into account and find solutions to that. So this is very important. This is where that we took that stand in 2006 onwards as to especially looking into the children affected by war, by providing them all aspects of life and to make sure that they become good citizens. I think this is what the lesson that we learned. And this is what the other people also should respect and also go by the laws and see what is happening in their own backyards.
Thank you, Dayani. I mean, basically, glorifying terrorism and the use of children to glorify terrorism in any civilized society, I mean, so-called highly developed countries, they turn a blind eye. And when it is convenient to them, they just don't look at it. I think that's wrong. I mean, these are children. These are children of, the citizens are of that particular country now. Maybe they have their origin somewhere else. So this is the future. I mean, if you incite violence among the little kids, one day they might be violent. So this is, I think, something consciously these so-called highly developed countries should avoid. In order to get some votes, in order to get some funding, they just allow this to happen. Now, Sudanta, would you like to have a final say on this?
Yes, sir. In simple, nobody can take back what as a country Sri Lanka had done for these children. Those helpless parents will always talk about what we did and how we gave life back to them. Those children will always be grateful for us. And though we talk of 594, it's not 594, it's thousands, because number was taken as they entered the process, but there have been thousands who lost their childhood, who lost the rights of children, who lost the right to education and all that along the years, and who joined us maybe after 19 plus during the rehabilitation process. The fact is, we have done a lot and we gave them life back. The government gave an amnesty for them, unconditional amnesty to everybody. So it should be respected, it should be accepted whether you like it or not. Those are facts. Thank you.
Thank you, Sudanta. You really brought out the rehabilitation process. And actually, while you were talking, there was a question flash on the screen. It is interesting to find out what these children who were rehabilitated after 2009 are doing now in 2021. So that will be a very interesting study, maybe Mal. Food for thought, because with your experience in that process, how are they living now? You see, we have given them life back to them. That's the most important thing. So Mal, over to you.
I have to say that the president at the time in 2009 asked the Bureau to bring these children back to mainstream society. And how do you do it? You treat them as your own children. How would you treat if your child is misguided, how would you bring your child back? So that was the ethos of rehab. And that is how we managed to bring back the children back into mainstream society. I have been involved with the assessment of the children, their radicalization levels, their psychosocial functioning. And this assessment we carried out from 2009 right through until 2017. And during this period of time, I had the privilege of meeting the children whom I saw in Ambepussa. I saw them again back in the community. I was stunned to see how beautifully they had grown up in spite of the LTT. In spite of the LTT, had the government not mandated the rehab to happen, I cannot imagine where these children would have been. But to see them in government administration, some of them are working as the GS in divisions, others are working in the district secretariats. So I have had the honor of seeing this. And I want to say that I'm proud of each and every child that went through this rehab program and have turned their life around. And my message to the youth out there who is currently being radicalized is that you do not know, like like Admiral Columbage said, you do not know what it is like to live and to go through this. Because we had one rehab person, a beneficiary of the rehab program, tell the diaspora, you pack your picnic basket, you dress your children in beautiful shoes, and you go for protest, but you have done nothing to help us to rise again. It is the government of this country that we fought, and now they are helping us to get back on our feet. And they told this directly to diaspora members who visited. So to the parents out there who are allowing your children to be radicalized, think again, because one is the youth that are being radicalized will end up in conflict. So if you do not want your children to see engaging in violent conflicts and ruining their life in the future, stop it. You should stop it now, because your children cannot make that decision. You're their guardian. And that's why there are so many rights. So for the sake of your child, then you need to stop that. And Sri Lanka has done what no other country has done. Why we say it is a success is that this program was assessed, and this program is in par with the Singapore program, the Saudi program, and it has done much more than that. And that is acknowledged internationally, though people might not want to acknowledge it. It is printed. Anybody who wants to read up on it, this program has been assessed and it's out there in the public domain.
Mal, thank you very much. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I'm sure you see a lot of flowers on our table today. And I'm a father, I'm a grandfather. To me, children are like flowers. They are very innocent. No one has the right to rob the children of their childhood. No one has the right to exploit children for their personal gains. Let them have their childhood. Now, we spoke about the children who were either surrendered or taken by the military for rehabilitation. But do we know how many children would have really suffered and died in the battle without coming to our attention? We don't even know that. We only know the good side, the people who were rehabilitated recent, and one person even became a doctor. We know the good side, I mean, the best side of the coin, but we don't know how many innocent children who had suffered in the jungles at the hand of LTTE and perish. And finally, I would say, the childhood of the Tamil children robbed by the LTTE, the government of Sri Lanka gave back. So ladies and gentlemen, with this, I will hand over to the compeer to conclude the proceedings because we are running out of time. Thank you. And I like to thank my panel, the best, I think, in the country. I cannot think of a better panel than this. Of course, incidentally, I have one of my teachers on my left. I was a student under her as well, but I have been working with Mal and of course my colleague. So I'm really happy and proud to chair a session like this. Thank you very much for your excellent contribution.
Thank you very much, Admiral Professor Columbage, for moderating the session and the three guest speakers for their insightful presentations. With that, we conclude the panel discussion on Sri Lanka's children as instruments of war. Now, the time for the distribution of token of appreciations. First of all, we would like to thank our guest speakers at today's panel discussion. I would like to call upon Professor Jayanath Columbage, RSP, VSV, USP, RCDS, PSC to give away the certificates. Now, let me cordially invite our guest speakers, Dr. Dayani Panagoda, Senior Technical Advisor, USAID SCO Project. Then, Dr. Malkanthi Hettiarachchi, Clinical Psychologist. and Major General Sudhanta Ranasinghe, RWP, RSP, NTU, PSC, Additional Secretary, Disaster Management, State Ministry of National Security and Disaster Management. And also, we would like to thank our moderator, the Director General of Institute of National Security Studies, for adding value to this panel discussion and supporting the organizing committee with his expertise. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Now, to deliver the vote of thanks, I would like to invite Ms. Lugadarani Yogaraja.
On behalf of the Director General of the Institute of National Security Studies, Admiral Professor Jayanath Kalamage, expert panelists, and the entire staff, and for all those who have joined with us virtually, good morning. It is my privilege to be asked to deliver the vote of thanks on this occasion. On behalf of the Director General, Admiral Professor Jayanath Kalamage, the Institute is indebted to our distinguished panelists who have gracefully accepted our invitation and taken the time off from their busy schedule for sharing knowledge and providing critical evaluation with a resourceful feedback to the topic at hand today. The Institute is privileged to have received support from this team of high qualified and dedicated professionals who have joined here with us today. I would like to extend my sincere appreciation to the Director General of the Institute of National Security Studies for delivering an insightful keynote address that carried the concept for today's panel discussion. Sir, thank you for the guidance and support which is given to us at all times. I must convey my gratitude to the Foreign Ministry for coordinating and assisting with our staff at all times in making this webinar a success. Thanks to the advancement of technology, today's webinar was conducted amidst the COVID-19 pandemic successfully by MAC Holdings for providing this virtual platform free of charge and assisting to all the details as always. I also take this moment to say a special thanks to our virtual participants, comprising of renowned intellectuals, military officers, the defenders of our nation, both serving and retired, representatives from Sri Lanka missions in abroad, the representatives of embassies, high commissions, and in Sri Lanka, and all private and government organizations and institutions for attending this webinar and making it a success. Last but not least, the entire staff of INSS for working beyond their limit and meticulously attending to all the details, even at the last minute, and making all the arrangements for this webinar to be a success. If by any chance to anyone whom I owe gratitude, to who I have not mentioned, I say a big thank you. I wish all the best for everyone and hope you would continue to engage in all the upcoming events that will be organized by the Institute of National Security Studies. Thank you and have a great day.